Welcome to the Andy Staples Show, and it is talking season. I know what you're thinking. We hear you talk every day on this show. I know, but they're going to be talking about football that's actually close now. And I brought on Sam Kahn Jr. and Chris Vannini from The Athletic to help me because Big 12 Media Days starts Wednesday. You're listening to this podcast Wednesday morning. In a few hours, someone will be talking about an actual football season that is going to happen. And I'm sure they'll get peppered with realignment questions too, but they'll also be talking about football. Chris Vannini, you will be there. Sam, you cover these schools all the time. I'm excited just because we might get out of the realignment, NIL, all of that haze for a bit to potentially talk about the game on the field.
That would be nice.
I don't think so. I think we're going to be talking realignment nonstop. Look, it was a year ago at this media days. At the very end, unprompted, Bob Bowlesby was asked a question about playoff expansion, which was the whole big topic last year.
Right.
And at the very end of his press conference, Bob Bowlesby says he brings up realignment on his own, and he says, "It doesn't appear to me that the motivation is there at this point in time. Not to say it couldn't happen, but it's not one of those things that keeps me up at night. Thank you all for being here."
Should have been keeping him up at night.
Yeah, famous last words.
Kiss of death. Oh my goodness!
Didn't in 2011? Didn't they introduce Dan Beebe to like some? I don't even know if was it like Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now by Starship or something like that, and it was like everything's great, we're back together. And then like A&M was on the road to being gone within like 2 weeks.
Yeah, something like that. I believe.
Yeah, it was. Things changed rather quickly in the realignment cycle, as we all learned. And man, what a wild year! It's not even. It still has not been a full calendar year since that news broke about Texas and OU. That was July 21st, 2021. Wow. So
yeah, that was
we have still not reached a full year, and it feels like 3 years since that happened.
That it is crazy. And the Big 12 has a new commissioner, Brett Yormark, who will be, starting, and we'll finally get to know him a little bit. All my questions would be about Jay-Z and Beyonce, but I'm sure that some people will ask him how he plans to run the Big 12. The more I think about what you said, Chris, I think you're right. We are going to be talking about, especially with this league, because this league's been through more than any other league. And I kind of think that's what makes it equipped to deal with what comes next. But it feels to me like until we know whether the Big Ten is going to take Oregon and Washington, that something has to happen with the Pac-12 and the Big 12. And maybe the ACC gets mixed in there too. But it feels like somebody's got to go one way or the other, either to the Pac-12 from the Big 12 or to the Big 12 from the Pac-12, or they merge or something. But it doesn't feel like this will hold.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're going to ask everybody. Texas and Oklahoma on their way out. How do you feel about this being the last year? Everybody
don't
else
care.
What do you, everybody else? What do you think about potentially adding Big 12 schools? I mean, we at the Athletic did a big story last week, kind of on the state of things, and a lot of people in the Big 12 feel good about the position of the league, and we're aggressively trying to add some Pac-12 schools. Now, whether those Pac-12 schools want to come or not is still being worked out, or the reverse happens. So, yeah, it's going to be one of the topics asked to everybody, I think, this week. And that's kind of – this is one of the two pillars of realignment right now. One of them is Notre Dame, and the other is what do the Big 12 and Pac-12 do? Some sort of work up with something? I don't know, but I'm sure Brett Yormark has worked on his answers to those questions.
Am I crazy for thinking the Big 12 has an advantage here in that they don't have to care if Oregon and Washington stay? Like that seems like the big difference between the Big 12 and the Pac-12. And the other thing with the Big 12, to me, at least if you look at the lineup they'll have once Texas and Oklahoma leave, it feels like they have a stronger middle than the Pac-12 does.
Yeah, I think when you look at the ceiling for the programs that are coming in, because remember, the programs that are coming in have not been operating with the budget that the current Big 12 schools are. So when you start raising that, and you think about the success that BYU, Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston have all had, the conference is already good top to bottom. It's already competitive. It's really hard to go undefeated in that league. So now you add 4 quality programs who have had a history of success. You're going to raise the ceiling on those programs. And like you said, it's going to be a stronger middle. There is not going to be a big dog, tentpole program that's a blue blood at the top anymore. But when you add those 4 to Baylor, Oklahoma State, TCU, Kansas State, Tech looks like it could be on the rise if they recruit at the level they are now. Boy, it gets really, really thick. And so I think, to your point, would you like to have those tentpole programs like in Oregon or Washington? Absolutely. But I don't think you're going to die without them at this point.
Well, that's what I feel like they can ask them and say, we don't care if you leave. Whereas the remaining schools, and I guess we should call it the Pac-10 again, that they have a history together. Like, it matters to them if they stay together. I wouldn't think it matters to TCU or Oklahoma State whether Oregon comes in and leaves or stays forever. Like, it wouldn't make a difference to them, I don't think.
Yeah, the trade-off you wrote about last week was essentially bring them in, but let Oregon and Washington leave if they want to. That would appear to be the most enticing offer you could make if you're the Big 12. And
then you've got Utah and Colorado once they leave, or the Arizona schools, or as we learned from that TV story, Washington State, who apparently everybody loves to watch.
And it comes down to, do the conferences want each other to survive or not? If you're the Big 12, it's probably in your best interest to try to kill the Pac-12, which is
it's merger or murder at this point. Which
Big 12 learned that last year. Pac-12 learned that this year that it didn't do it last year.
So the merger thing, if you did a full merger, it's 22 schools, which sounds unwieldy, but we're talking potentially, if Notre Dame were to say, yeah, we're joining a conference, then you could see a 20-team Big Ten or a 20-team SEC at some point. Like, is it that far-fetched?
No, I don't think so. Especially nowadays that, there's no more rules about divisions and all that, and you can get creative with your scheduling model. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Honestly, if you're going to go that big, it makes it the conferences are so geographically wide now that I don't think it is that far-fetched to go that big if you have to.
Literally, Orlando, Florida to Seattle, Washington.
It would be amazing.
That's the entire country.
By the way, I only know this because we had a family member move to Seattle in the last couple of years. Got multiple direct flights a day from Orlando to Seattle. It's happening.
There's a reason. There's a reason all those schools were pitching their airports a decade ago.
That's right.
Kansas City Airport, not great, but they're rebuilding it.
One of the great stories of realignment is Tom Jurich, the former Louisville athletic director. He will never let this go, and I can't say I blame him. He said that Chuck Ninus, when he was running the Big 12, as they were deciding who to add, kept saying the airport, the airport, the airport, the airport. If you've ever been to the University of Louisville's campus, you can't possibly be closer to the Louisville airport without actually being on the runway. And they took West Virginia, where the nearest airport is in Pittsburgh.
I tell you what, I think the nearest school to an airport that I've seen is FAU, which literally has a private airstrip right next to the practice field. I went
Texas
there one time.
A&M, you can land a 737 across the street from campus, so it's pretty close.
Yeah, but I remember I talked to Lane Kiffin about that, and he's like, "Yeah, it works as crowd noise essentially when you got planes."
Well, I would love to see some closure on this, and if you're the Big 12, maybe there's this possibility of a quicker bite at the apple, because your TV contract ends in 2025, the Pac-12's ends in 2024. I would think merger, or you're taking some of them one way or the other. You try to get that deal in earlier.
Yeah, the TV deal is the leverage at this point. That's where, like you said, the strength of what they have from a competitive football product standpoint is going to help them. And if they can add to it, then all the more appealing they become. And then they span, a lot of different time zones too. So I think there's some real appeal. And I'll say this, just from and I'm sure you guys have heard it, but just from talking to people within the conference, I get the sense that that even the conference, before all this happened, the conference as constructed, that they weren't going to take as much of a hit in terms of TV finances as people thought they would.
No, because it's 12 years later, the dollar figures have gone up. Mm-hmm. So yes, Texas and Oklahoma are gone. You don't make what you would have made if they were there, but you can make something close to what you make now, which, oh, by the way, more than the ACC will make for the next 14 years, if it comes to that.
Right. It's not necessarily about the entire value. It's about the slices of the pie. That's the thing with the Pac-12 deal. They're losing the two schools. The estimates are it will lose 40% of its potential value. Oof. But based on the per school divide, it's only about 25%. Yeah. So it's not as bad because you're splitting it fewer ways. Now the Big 12 is adding schools, so it's still going to be split different ways. But essentially, if you're merging the two conferences, if you're taking everybody and go to 22, that's cleaner than do we leave Oregon State and Washington State kind of out to dry.
Well, and here's the value to TV networks there, because where I see with like the ACC Pac-12 talks, which obviously driven by ESPN because they want to keep the ACC together. They've got the ACC on the cheap. Why on earth would you want to give that up and have to pay more for the same product? But they don't want also fighting for the time slot. Somebody needs to own that Pacific time zone prime time. And right now, you don't have that if you don't have the Pac-12 or those schools. And the Big 12, especially if you wanted to divide in a certain way, you could create a division that populates that time slot very well. Like between Washington State, Washington, Oregon, Stanford, Cal, Utah, Colorado, BYU, Texas Tech, even though they're in the central time zone, they're very far west. You can make that work. And that's the other part is I don't know that Fox has the bandwidth to put that much in that time slot. So I think it's pretty important to ESPN to get some product for that time slot.
Yeah, Fox famously does not have night games for its college football. They put that on FS1. They'll have baseball or something like that on Saturday nights. So if you can have games from noon to midnight, that's incredibly valuable. That's what the Big Ten is going to have when it adds those schools. That's what the American was looking at last year when it considered adding 4 Mountain West schools. To be able to populate every time slot, especially the ones out west, that's another kind of value for a conference that kind of needs to be taken into account.
It's funny you mentioned Texas Tech being far west, which they are in Texas. They very much feel like a Pac-12 after dark school to me. You talk about TV time slots, like Texas Tech and late night
air raid. Yeah, like Texas Tech, Washington State right now would be a pure air raid game. It would be, Zach Kitley and Eric Morris going at it. So.
We just got Mississippi State, Texas Tech in the bowl game. We got that last year. It'd be similar deal.
Yep. So I'm very interested to see how this all gets figured out. If you're Brett Yormark, what are you thinking? Like you get this job and this just bomb drops.
Welcome to college football, buddy.
Golly.
Yeah, Kevin Warren comes in from outside college sports. He gets hit with the pandemic right away.
Yeah,
George Kliavkoff comes in, immediately gets hit with playoff expansion, and now Yormark's coming in with realignment. And George had that too last year. So all these new commissioners are immediately getting hit in the face with, college sports is not run like a normal business.
No, it's a very weird business. Doing this whole body transformation thing, getting in my daily workout is a must. But up until recently, if I had a few drinks the day before, it sometimes didn't happen. Now, though, I drink a Z-Biotics before any alcohol, and I know tomorrow I'm going to be able to stick to my routine. We all have busy lives, and these days, it can't afford to waste a day stuck on the couch because of a few drinks the night before. Z-Biotics is the answer we've all been looking for. Z-Biotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break down this byproduct. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut where you need it the most. Just remember to drink ZBiotics before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. The first time I tried it, I drank the ZBiotics. I was going to have a few old fashions, and I know those can hit pretty hard, especially if I have them close to bedtime, but woke up fresh as a daisy, felt great. And now every time I know I'm going to have something, pop a ZBiotics, doing good. So give ZBiotics a try for yourself. Go to zbiotics.com/Andy to get 15% off your first order when you use the code Andy at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/Andy and use the code Andy at checkout for 15% off. Thank you to ZBiotics for sponsoring this episode. Now, the business is football, and there is a Big 12 season to be played. Texas and Oklahoma are still there. We got to talk about that part of it. And that's what a lot of the questions are going to be at Big 12 Media Day. You got a new coach at Oklahoma. Brent Venables coming back to Oklahoma after being at Clemson for all these years brings a different sensibility to them, but also brought Jeff Lebby, who brings an offense that is very familiar to Big 12 fans because it was run at Baylor for a long, long time. You have that. You have Steve Sarkisian, year 2 at Texas, coming off 5-7. You have Baylor coming off a championship, but they said goodbye to their starting quarterback from last year because they're like, we think the guy who started the Big 12 championship game might be better. And so they're doing that. New coach at TCU, new coach at Texas Tech, new quarterback who everybody in college football knows at Kansas State, and then no Brock Purdy at Iowa State for the first time in a quarter century. That about sum it up?
End of an era at Iowa State. No Brock Purdy, no Breece Hall.
Yeah. It feels like anything can happen from a football standpoint in this league this year.
Yeah, Baylor was the preseason media pick to win, but by a very small margin. I think Oklahoma's the favorite in Vegas. So this league is wide open. I mean, Sam said it before, but this league is incredibly deep, top to
I didn't
bottom.
even mention Oklahoma State, who played for the title and came a yard short of it, or actually half a yard short.
And Kansas, who people might forget, but they beat Texas last year.
They did beat Texas.
Almost beat Oklahoma.
Yes.
That too.
Yes.
I mean, they're competitive now. They're a real football team now. Lance Leipold has gotten them going. So, West Virginia is going to be interesting with, JT Daniels, got Graham Harrell's OC now. Dante Stills is back. They're going to be an interesting group. So this is really, like you said, I think that to me, the top 3 teams, I think Baylor, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State. Could Texas jump in? Possibly. They have to prove it to me first. But I think those 3 I think those are the 3 right now. And then everything else is wide open from there.
To me, Texas feels like if some of their young linemen come along quicker than you'd expect, that by the end of this season, they could be pretty good. They're loaded at the skill positions. We don't know exactly how the quarterback situation is going to shake out, whether it's going to be Quinn Ewers or Hudson Card. It seems like it's going to be Quinn Ewers, but they are as deep as anybody in the country at running back. They've got a very good receiving core. We just don't know if they can protect. And then they're old on the D-line. They're not necessarily loaded with NFL guys on the D-line, but they are old, and there's something to be said for that. So I am curious about whether they can jump in or become that team that in the second half of the season, you're in trouble. Oklahoma, to me, is an interesting one because it feels like the assumption when Lincoln Riley left was, oh, no, they're done. They're going to stink now. They'll never be able to compete in the SEC when they get there. I mean, this program's been good forever. They had, 6 mediocre seasons in the mid to late 90s, and then they've just been good all the rest of the time. So why do we assume that they're not going to just keep being good?
Whatever you do, don't keep them out of your too early preseason top 25, or they're going to be mad about that.
I'm sure.
As Stuart Mandel has found out over the spring. But yeah, I mean, Oklahoma's always been good and they lost a lot, but they did add a lot.
Right.
They lost Caleb Williams. They added Dillon Gabriel, who going into last year was one of the best quarterbacks in the country, we thought, before he got hurt. So it's like you got to consider both sides of this. That just brings a lot of questions. How is the new staff going to look? How are the new players going to look? We've not had this much questions at Oklahoma since Bob Stoops got there, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to work. We just kind of got to see it first.
Yeah, the Dillon Gabriel piece, and he's reunited with Jeff Lebby, who was his OC as a freshman at UCF, and that was a good offense at UCF. Yeah. Dillon Gabriel's freshman year.
So he wanted Jeff Lebby to get the job when Scott Frost left. They went with Gus Malzahn, but there were players who wanted Jeff Lebby to get that job.
Yeah, so I am not writing them off. I'm also not writing them off because Brent Venables knows what he wants on defense, and I think they're going to play some guys differently on defense. I know Oklahoma fans got a little frustrated with Alex Grinch's defense in the last year. And if you watch him, especially like I was watching Perrion Winfrey practice at the Senior Bowl, and I'm like, why do they just use him the way he's supposed to be used? Like, that frustrates you. I don't blame Oklahoma fans for feeling that way. So Brent Venables, I don't worry about using somebody the wrong way. In fact, his sort of one of the things he's been great at is finding guys who he can use maybe in a way you wouldn't expect. I mean, Isaiah Simmons, nobody knew what to do with him because he's a tweener. Brent Venables essentially invents a position for him and just lets him wreak havoc. So that part I am excited to see because, as you guys both know, because you watch this league a lot, it is not what a lot of people in the country think it is, where it's just 56-48 it's not. No. This is probably the most schematically diverse league in the country now. It's kind of a lab for everybody else. I mean, everybody has stolen Iowa State's defense basically. And now you see, Baylor doing something a little bit different. I mean, Baylor's got the first dominant interior defensive lineman I can remember in years in this league, in Apuika. Now he's a LSU transfer, but like, when's the last time there was a 330-pound nose that people were scared of in the Big 12?
And then they got another one when they got Jackson Player from Tulsa who's going to rotate with him. So, exactly. So now they got two. Yeah, defense is back in this league. Baylor was really good. Oklahoma State was one of the best in the country last year. Yeah. Haycock at Iowa State has really built a blueprint there, like you said, that a lot of others have followed. It's a good defensive league now. And no, it's not. I mean, we got 4 teams in the conference that allowed fewer than 22 points a game last year. So this is not the old, 10 personnel, let's run 80 plays and, have 110 points on the board.
Although that's back at Texas Tech.
That is back.
And now I'm curious about that because I thought Donovan Smith looked great at the end of last season and was very impressed with the way he handled all that stuff. But now Tyler Shook is back and healthy. So if you're Zach Kitley, who's the new OC, remember he went from Houston Baptist. He and Bailey Zappi both went from Houston Baptist to Western Kentucky. They set a bunch of records. Kitley, who is from Lubbock originally, back home now at Texas Tech, and he's got a choice between these two quarterbacks. Who do you think he winds up taking?
It may not be. It could be either of them, but he also could be their young guy, Baron Morton, who it's the highest ranked quarterback signing they had in 2021. He's redshirted last year. He's not there yet in terms of, adjusting, but his arm talent is probably the best in the group. And when I talked to Kitley earlier this year, actually last month when I went over there, he said he thinks Baron Morton's got a chance to be maybe the best or one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the program. Now he's got to catch up to where Donovan and Shuck are in terms of just, reps and experience and facing, Big 12 defenses. But I think it could be any of the three. I think to me, it's philosophical for Tech. Do you want to win more games this year than you go with Shuck or Smith? Do you want to just say, let's just bet the farm on the young guy and let's see if we have a long-term deal here? And then you take your lumps now with Morton, start him now, and then, take your year one with him and then build for the future.
This is a program that fired Matt Wells, by the way, before he could win too many games, and then they couldn't fire him.
Yes.
So philosophically is probably the right way to put it.
Yeah.
Real quick, I want to go. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I was going to say, he's got the one thing is that Joey McGuire has is he's got the support, buddy. They have ramped up facilities. They've ramped up.
Oh yeah, they
staff
just said they're
pool.
building a new facility.
Yeah.
They've got a recruiting class that doesn't look like any recruiting class they've ever had before.
Yeah. So I think he's probably going to buy himself some time just on that alone, just on the energy he's built this offseason. But go ahead.
Yeah, Joey McGuire's got time, but that recruiting class, you want to be able to hold it.
Yeah.
And that would behoove you to win games this year. Back to your point about, do you want to build for the future? Or do you want to win games this year? That kind of comes into play too. If they get off to a good start, if they have a pretty good record, that could, make things a little bit easier to try to hold on to those recruits. But we're talking about the air raid here. Andy, I want to go back to something you said a minute ago about how this is not an air raid conference anymore like it is. I know you make a lot of bets on this podcast, and I feel like we need to make a bet that at some point one of the coaches or somebody will say basically what you said, that this is not the old Big 12. We play defense here. I've been to the last 3 or 4 Big 12 media days. Every single year that point is made.
If we turn that into a drinking game, somebody's going to get hammered.
Yeah,
guaranteed.
Yeah, that is definitely going to come up at media days about how we play defense in this league. We run the ball. It's been that way for half a decade now. But that image, that brand that the Big 12 had for so long is still there. If you're not paying attention.
Yeah. That's, I think, if you're listening to this on Wednesday, my Dear Andy column comes out on Thursday. I got a question about that I thought was interesting, and I'll pose it to you. I'm curious what you guys think about this. Basically, the person asked me, let's say the Big 12 and the Pac-12 merge, or there's some sort of, cross-pollination, one takes from the other. Would it behoove both of them, one or both of them, to rebrand? And you know what? With the Big 12, I think that's probably a good thing. I don't see a reason why you wouldn't do that, because you think about the Big 12. Now, I got in trouble. I said on Pardon My Take, I was saying, if you're Texas and Oklahoma, people are getting mad because you're leaving behind, 25 years of beautiful tradition in the Big 12, because it only started in 1996. And the K-State fans are like, yeah, but we were with Oklahoma for 100 years. I'm like, yeah, but Oklahoma doesn't care about that. Like, otherwise they wouldn't be leaving you. So
Correct.
Why? I was talking about Oklahoma and Texas has no reason to care about the Big 8, and Oklahoma has no reason to care about the Southwest Conference. So it's not that much tradition. Let's be honest. And let's be honest, the early part of the league was built around who are the primary brands: Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Colorado, Texas A&M, all gone. So they're gone. What was it built on after that? Air raid offenses. That's not the brand all over the league. And there's one, but it's not the brand all over the league anymore. So what's wrong with having a new brand?
Do you have a name in mind? Have you determined yet
Yes.
what you would call this new league?
Well, if they merged, or if one took a significant amount of schools from the other, and my thought is if that happened, it would be the Big 12 taking from the Pac-12. I would call it the Super Conference, or maybe just the Super League, because there's nobody's officially claimed the word super yet. And if you're going to say this is a Super Conference era, be like, we are the Super Conference, baby.
You're going with the Mike Oresco Power 6. Let's get ahead of it and let's brand it that way. I love it.
Now, look, we already have Conference USA and the American Athletic Conference, so all of America is pretty much covered in these. You know what I would call
Conference USA? That would be the perfect name, but it's taken.
Yeah, you know what I would call it?
What's that?
If you think about the Big 12, you think about adding the Arizona schools, especially. I'm saying this partially kind of in a joking way, but also in a serious way. I would bring back the name Southwest Conference. I think.
Provided you didn't take anybody from the Northwest. Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, you probably would take people from the Northwest. But look, we got a Big 10 with 16 teams. So, it's just how it is.
Well, that's what I think the Big 10 now has locked down the concept of a conference called Big Insert Number here. So don't do another one of those.
Yeah, I mean, you can call it the Big Conference at this point. It's pretty close enough. But,
the huge conference.
I wanted the American, when the Big East splintered and those leftover schools became the American, I wanted them to bring back the Metro Conference.
Oh yeah.
Because
Oh,
almost all of those schools were
they
in
were
big
Metro
cities.
Conference, yeah.
They were literally metropolitan areas. And so
I will say the Metro Conference also included Florida State. Tallahassee's not the biggest town in the world, and Columbia, South Carolina is not the biggest town in the world. They were in the Metro as well. I mean, it was basically if your football team was independent, you needed a basketball team to have a league. That's what the Metro Conference was.
Right.
So yeah,
I don't know. I think the Southwest Conference, I think there's just so much, and Chris, you know it just from living down here. There's so much nostalgia attached to it. Mm-hmm. I would feel wrong having that.
In the NIL era, having a Southwest Conference would be pretty awesome, though.
That would, because it's man. I mean, hey, we got SMU out here posting gold Trans Ams on the Twitter account now.
Exactly.
Spoiler alert for a story that's coming out later. I talked to Eric Dickerson today about NIL. So that'll be out at some point.
Yes. I love it.
Can you imagine the deal he would have had on rec specs alone?
I asked him that. I literally asked him that. He kind of did. He was like, I don't know. I wasn't really good till my senior year, but I think we all know when Texas A&M was offering you cattle.
Everybody thought he was going to be good in high school. So they predicted that
Texas
correctly.
A&M's offering you cattle and frozen beef and a gold Trans Am. I think he would have done pretty well.
How many half cows do you think Eric Dickerson would have gotten, had in his freezer if he'd signed with A&M?
He said the Texas A&M people said, we'll always make sure there's beef in your freezer.
I love it. That is the most Texas thing ever.
I would have signed in blood if they told me that.
They can go back to that strategy. Jimbo's got a ranch down. He's got 2 ranches. He's got one in West Virginia. He's got one down here about 30 miles from campus. He can go back to that strategy if he wants. He's really into that. So,
I think that would violate Texas state law. I think someone else has to give them the beef. But
44 Farms, that's the place he goes and does his the cattle auctions. So
there you go.
So 44 Farms, get on it. Get an NIL deal for some Texas.
I realize we're talking about Big 12 media days, so the Jimbo Fisher talk we should save till next week when the SEC goes. But we are talking about cattle auctions also. What would you give to hear him as the guest auctioneer at a cattle auction? I don't think he has to change anything about the cadence of his speech.
I want to go to one of those one time. That's one of the things I want to do. I want to go to one of those cattle auctions with him just to see how that goes.
Hey, Sam, have you been to one?
I have not. No, I haven't.
Okay, I've been we'll go to dog shows. My wife will compete in dog sports and stuff. And a lot of times we go over to Fort Worth, not the stockyards, but they got a big facility there, and it's used for horses and cattle and stuff like that. So if you make a wrong turn, you walk into a cattle auction sometimes, and
that's awesome.
People walking by on horses carrying cattle with them.
This feels
the stereotypes of Texas are there.
Sonny Dykes, get going here. We're just giving you ideas.
That's right.
There's no reason you should be behind Texas Tech in recruiting when you have this at your disposal.
Livestock. Offer livestock, Sonny.
You take those recruits over to the Fort Worth stockyards.
Can you imagine the kind of lineman you'd be able to sign if that was the currency you were trading in?
I mean, they already got some of the premier barbecue joints in Fort Worth, so
exactly. I mean, Heim's all over. They've expanded all over the Metroplex, but they started there. Those bacon burn ends, holy mackerel! That is Now, here's the pro tip. You get the medium, the medium mac and cheese side, and then you get your bacon burn ends, and you just put all your bacon burn ends in the mac and cheese and stir it up.
Whoa. Ari and I got to do that the next time we get together.
Absolutely. He's got one right by his house.
I know. Him and I haven't gone to that one yet, but we need to.
Yeah, it is spectacular. And yes, all these Big 12 schools, because Waco didn't have great barbecue for a while, but they do now. They have Hellberg, they have Guest Family Barbecue in Waco, and everybody's got somewhere that can really bring it. So
Evie Mays out near Lubbock.
Heck, even in Orlando, Four Rivers started. That's one of the few places outside Texas you can feel comfortable ordering brisket. So UCF's good to go. They're covered.
There you go.
Now,
the barbecue conference. This is what we're going to make it. We can make the Big 12 and Pac-12 the new barbecue conference.
Morgantown needs to add pulled pork and brisket biscuits to the Tudor's Biscuit World menu. That would help. That would help them, I think.
It's a good call.
I'm so hungry right now. Good Lord. Well, gentlemen, it has been a pleasure. I cannot wait to see what happens. This is one of those things where I just, if last year's sets of media days are any indication, we'll be throwing on an emergency podcast at some point. So I want you guys to be ready. Have your microphones ready because we could be calling it anytime.
I can't believe we're already here, man. Media days for us is the start of football season.
Yes.
So like it's here now. And there's going to be SEC next week, everything else kind of coming after that. So football season is basically here. And I swear it feels like the national championship game was like 2 weeks ago. I don't know where the offseason went.
Hey, it was very busy, and that's good. That's good for us, good for business. But the thing that's better for business, actual football. It's coming. Enjoy media days, everybody. We'll talk to you on Friday.